Work in the material world. In regard to work, two principles are important for any person, even if he or she is not mature enough to be able to comprehend the highest religious truths. These are honesty and striving to learn as much as possible. The second principle implies not only aspiration towards study, but also quite frequent changing of the field of applying one's efforts and change of places of work. We come to every new place enriched by the experience we gained at all of our previous places of work. This significantly enriches our experience, develops us intellectually, and creates an objective prerequisite for respectful attitude from other people. For religious people, the attitude towards their work implies a more serious approach. Namely, they should regard their social activity as their service to God. This is called Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga is the path of self-development through helping God in his evolution. This consists in various kinds of help to other people, help in what is really useful for them, including spiritual help. We have to try to serve people with our highest abilities, as well as to aspire to master even higher skills for our service. This attitude towards work implies that personal material gain moves far down on the list of our motives, because this kind of service is a way to express our love for God and for people. But is it right to sell love? Krishna said about this, "Regard only the work and not the reward for it." Miserable are those who act for the sake of getting reward for their activity. Bhagavad Gita. Karma Yoga does not imply working for free, but Karma Yogis eat remains of their sacrificial offerings, as Krishna figuratively put it. Those who receive help must not forget that the one who helps them also has to pay for food, transport, accommodation, and so on. Let us recall the words of Jesus Christ that relate to this. Laborers deserve their food. Laborer deserves to be paid. And important words from the Bhagavad Gita. The one who receives gifts and gives no gifts in return is verily a thief. Man develops love, wisdom, and power through constant spiritual quest, which has to be accompanied by service according to the Karma Yoga principles. We have talked much about love. Now let us talk about wisdom. Without this quality, one cannot achieve perfection and merge with God. Wisdom is the knowledge of the most essential things. What is God? What is man? What is the meaning of man's life? And what is the evolution of the universal consciousness? It also implies being familiar with the diversity of human souls, as well as the ability to classify people according to their qualities, faculties, and psychogenetic age. Wisdom consists also in knowing the straight path to perfection, and the ways people may diverge from it. Also, knowing how one can help people in their evolution by determining what kind of spiritual help would be most appropriate for them. One acquires wisdom by performing theoretic research and by gaining practical experience. The former consists in studying the instructions that God has been giving to incarnate people, as well as in getting acquainted with the experience of people who sought for God, their errors and successes. One gains practical knowledge by studying oneself and God, as well as by engaging in spiritual service and creative spiritual work. Spiritual service. We cannot reach the end of the path to God without helping other people spiritually. This is objectively necessary for the process of the evolution, since this makes the number of people initiated into spiritual knowledge grow. This also contributes to our own development, providing us with lessons in psychology, in particular. After all, the process of spiritual development can be considered as a course of learning to be God, and God is the perfect psychologist, the perfect soul knower. On the spiritual path, just like during a war, some of the human qualities get manifested in a dramatic way, such as stupidity of some superiors, which turns out disastrous for many people, and the wise heroism of the others, which saves many lives. In these battles, emotions of people get activated. Human cowardice, which makes those of little faith insane, gets highlighted. Manifestations of both vicious and high soul qualities also become more intense. Spiritual warriors temper themselves in rebutting attacks of envious persons and aggressive fools. Betrayals of best friends teach them not to get attached to people. The warriors develop themselves saving those who walk by their side the spiritual path or those who follow them. In the battles before the face of God, the warriors cultivate love, wisdom, and power, and thus gradually attain divinity. What must be the initial spiritual help to other people? First, it must consist in explaining to them the correct concept of God and of the path to Him. Second, in teaching them the methods of regulating one's own emotions. Those who deserve it, by intellectual and ethical criteria, may be taught the art of meditation. But before aspirants begin serious meditative work, they have to purify the body of energetic impurities. It is impossible to enter subtle eons, where God abides, from a contaminated and therefore sick body. This is why it is allowed to involve in esoteric practices only those aspirants who have renounced eating killed food, taking alcohol, tobacco, and similar toxic substances, and have abandoned close relationships, including sexual, with energetically coarse people. Aspirants have to set as their primary task the establishment in love and peace. And those who deviate from this path or do not make progress, they should be debarred from further studies for their own good. This is because the same psychic methods can bring those who are focused on refining of oneself and growing as love to God, but others who go in the opposite direction to hell, transforming them into devils. I have witnessed the latter many times in various cities and countries, including those where they used the methods developed with my help. Some instructors, either for money or fame, or simply due to their culpable irresponsibility, started to teach psychoenergetic methods to everyone interested without a careful prior selection of candidates. This led to personal tragedies and, in one case, even to formation of a criminal gang. Once I was careless enough to show wonderful places of power to many of those who subsequently proved undeserving. Now, I meet sometimes downright black magicians there, who leave traces of their energetic coarseness, defile the sacredness of those places. But there is no place for violence on the spiritual path. I do not have any right to demand that those perverts do not go there to grow devils out of themselves. God gave them free will, and they have a right to move in the direction of hell. Maybe after having lived in hell, they will want to escape from there, and then my books will probably help them. One of the wise things to know is that no one can be dragged into the abode of the Creator. He does not need this, let alone it is impossible. The spiritual path is primarily qualitative self-transformation, as opposed to, say, climbing a mountain. And it is we ourselves who can and have to walk this path. Other people can only show us the way. Everyone has to be absolutely free in building their own personal relationships with God. This is why there must be no religious discipline or strict subordination of people or spiritual groups. Everyone has to develop in total accordance with their own free will, given to them by God. Breaking this rule distorts the harmony of the evolution and interferes with God in His leading us to Himself. True and false attachments. The philosophical term attachment denotes the state of being firmly and for a long time attached by the indriyas to some objects. These can be parents, children, spouses, objects of sexual attraction, money, luxury items, high social status, favorite work, friends, one's own body, gaming, various kinds of food, alcoholic beverages, tobacco, or other toxins. In other words, we can see that attachments can be apparently harmful, not apparently harmful, or even quite useful at certain stages of the person's development. It is the latter that at times get us moving in various situations and moving with quite an emotional uplift. It is much worse to be inactive and live a lazy life. Let us look at the following analogy. One can steer an automobile or a ship only provided that they are moving, but if they do not have their own motion, it is extremely hard or impossible to direct or turn them anywhere. The same true is with every one of us. If we live an active life, even though without correct understanding of its meaning and of our supreme goal, then our moving allows God to create many learning situations for us. Only in this case can we develop and prepare ourselves for further spiritual ascents. In religious books, one may sometimes encounter a character of a seemingly positive hero who suddenly gives up taking care of his family and leaves to become a hermit in hope of spiritual achievements. It is presented as an exemplary cutting of attachments. But there is no truth in this. This way of detaching oneself is not only unjustified from the ethical standpoint, but also does not make any sense. Attachments should be replaced, as opposed to being dropped through an act of volition. We should try to fall in love with God. This is difficult to accomplish overnight, but we need to set this as our goal and ask God to help us. And then love for God will grow as we study Him with an inquiring mind through reading books, engaging in spiritual conversations, and personally asking Him to reveal Himself, to let us feel His love in full, to instruct us through a revelation. This is what correct initial distribution of our indriyas would be. Later on, when we start to feel real reciprocity of our love, the relationships with God progress even faster. Love gradually turns into passion, into a new attachment. And this new, true attachment and passion gradually displace all the others. This is how I have lived my life. Raised in an atheistic environment, I heard for the first time about the reality of God's existence only at the age of 27, but at that time nobody could explain to me what hides behind this. The Orthodox Church provided first mystical experiences, but it failed to answer the question about what God really is. God the Father was lost there. although he was the central figure in the teachings of Jesus Christ. Reading books allowed me to widen my spiritual horizon, but at that time there was no book in which everything would be presented in such a detailed and simple way as in the one you are reading now. I have never had an incarnate guru, a spiritual teacher, who would know all the way to God. There was none of them around me at that time apparently, and this is good in a certain sense, since having an incarnate guru, on the one hand, allows one to receive explanations and learn practical methods for working on self-development. But, on the other hand, relationships with him creates attachments to his incarnate form, instead of divine consciousness. In this case, the goal is not the highest, but an intermediate one, and not all disciples in this situation are capable of switching to the highest goal, the consciousness of God the Father. At that time, God set before me a scientist possessing significant research experience, the highest goal, himself in all his universal totality, and I fell in love with him. And then everything was quite simple. I started, as they say, to push my way through. I started going to him. Other people started following me. Many of them were joining and leaving, but they could not keep up with my speed and with my intensity. Some stepped aside quietly. Some protested and demanded a special kind of love for them, and hated me when they were not getting it. Some people betrayed me, doing mean things to me. Others defamed me, sometimes in public. Some people robbed me. There were even those trying to kill my body. But I went on without looking back, without falling in love with people, without getting involved in quarrels or avenging myself for the mean and cruel murder, although I found out the names of my murderers. I did not allow myself to stop because of the attachments to my honor, reputation, or my body in the end. I have never had disciples to whom I would sell the highest knowledge. What I did have were friends whom I loved very much, and I was giving to them my spiritual experience and myself. I lived for them and for God. I could not sell my love for money. Their progress was my reward. I loved them very much, but when they left, I was not attached to them, and forgot about them right away. I have never made, quite sincerely, a slightest attempt to make any of those who left me come back. On the contrary, I encouraged them to leave, so that not to overburden them with a load of knowledge unbearable to them. Some were leaving, being unable to understand me any more. God was bringing to me others, who were more prepared. I loved them even more, for they understood me better, but I still did not get attached to them. I was totally focused on my main love, the love for God. And whatever amounts of mud envious people, betrayers, and slanderers were throwing at me, I came out victorious of all the arguments. God accepted me in himself. I learned to merge with him in the embrace of love. I have won. It was not someone else that I conquered. No, I conquered myself, without causing any suffering to anyone, having become another kind of person, the kind that God needed. I have won, and now I am calling you to the same victory. And I am grateful to God and to all of those who were going together with me for my victory, those who loved and hated me. Through you, God enriched me and directed my life. Peace to all of you.